Welcome to Clarion Connection. I'm Ron Wilshire, and my guest today is Kelsey Huebert, the news director of WWCH and C93. Wanted to talk a little bit about the position of news director, what exactly that person does, and especially in light of, I understand you're looking at a career change.
Yeah, you could say that. Our position came up here at Clarion County Broadcasting for C93 and Radio 13 for a advertising sales position, and it really seemed like a good fit, and the rest of the staff was behind it, so I'm making a switch, still staying in-house, and I think I'll have sort of the advantage of knowing how the back of the house works and learning how the front of the house works with a fresh, clean slate. And, it should be a really interesting transition. And as a result, I do have to give up most of my responsibilities as news director, because it's a little bit of a conflict of interest having the same voice doing the news as out there selling the ads. So it should be definitely an interesting summer, at least an interesting June. We've got some ideas on deck for who will take over for me, but nothing really locked in yet. So I'm doing what I can to fulfill the responsibilities here, and at the same time learn how to take on the responsibilities up front.
So what does a news director do?
What?
For your replacement? Let's outline it here.
Well, let's see. All right, it's an interesting job, that's for sure. A lot of early mornings, and that's the truth. Our first broadcast is at 6 o'clock, and oftentimes you need to be here before that to get it ready, and then of course be here the rest of the morning to read live, and back again in the afternoon to do our 5 o'clock. So it does take a considerable amount of time, and now at the same time you'd want to leave time for real journalistic pursuits and developing news stories and discovering news stories, contacting your sources and trying to get actuality, which is in radio would be the cuts that we use from in audio that of people giving us quotes. Whether they're an authority or in law enforcement or something like that, somebody that knows what they're talking about and is authorized to talk about it, that's the one you want to talk to. And it takes a little while to establish those connections and learn their, workday habits, when they're going to call you back and whatnot. But once you build a rapport, you usually know who to call for a certain story, and you just go from there. And there's a little bit of a different skill to pick up. If my background's mostly in print, so it was definitely a transition and a lot to learn on the technical end, because in print it was mostly a word processor and Adobe InDesign for the layout, and then you just send it off to press. Well, in radio you have to know a little bit more about electronics, or at least be able to learn a little bit more about electronics to really get the job done right. So there's going to be a learning curve, I think, for anybody that hasn't done the job before.
What are the big challenges, though, that face in preparing the news? Is the news different for radio?
Yeah, absolutely. The news copy itself, the way the news is written, is definitely different for radio than in print. You have to actually leave a lot of the details out. Some of the details don't matter when you're talking about radio. You have to keep it concise and keep it short to keep your listeners engaged. And, of course, the airtime costs money to put it on there, so you don't want to fill it up with things that aren't necessarily necessary. You can kind of drop the time of an incident and just say it was the afternoon. And you don't always have to specify things like middle names or even an age if you're tight on time. So there's definitely a difference between one and the other, and you want to kind of make your lead a little stronger and always have active predicates, and make it really sound alive, and of course try to make it sound present tense, whereas in print it's almost always past tense. So there's a little bit more to know about it. If you have somebody looking over your shoulder, it's pretty easy to pick those things up.
As you ease out of the news at C93 and WWCH, any topics that you think might be in the news in the near future?
Well, definitely anything going on at the university is usually newsworthy for us. And matter of fact, coming up next week, I believe the 11th and the 12th, there's a
a conference, or
yeah, rural class economic development conference, and you can find out more about that on Clarion University's website, and it should be really interesting. And we have Ron Wilshire coming in, the provost at Clarion, to talk to us here on Friday, and we'll have that on the FM side at about 7:00. So it will be a very interesting summer, especially if they get the construction started. That'll be definitely of interest, and at least the developments in getting it there. Also, something that I've been interested in but haven't had a whole lot of time to pursue. Ron, you might be interested in this. Is how exactly are the new healthcare statutes affecting our local hospital at Clarion? You know, I got to imagine that they've had to make some changes, and that's something that I would like to investigate, and that could be something ongoing throughout the summer, because, you know, the implementation really only came down this April, and the changes will have to be forthcoming. So it should be really interesting to see.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I imagine there's still some unanswered questions with the whole Affordable Health Care Act, and Clarion's in a unique position now with the new primary healthcare network building, kind of across from the hospital,
right?
And they're designed to deal with the Medicaid and assistance type insurance that will probably be good for the county, and then give the hospital a break from some of the people they treat. So I think it'll be a good relationship. But how this whole healthcare thing works out, and even Pennsylvania, I think, has to decide. Corbett's been reluctant to decide, for the Medicaid, even when the feds are going to pay for most of it. So,
well, they'll pay for most for a few years.
Yeah,
and that's the interesting thing. Do you take the lump sum, or do you take the annuity payments? And so it should be interesting to see. That's something we'll be watching closely, especially as the budget comes down. I mean, it's going to affect everything in the state, almost everything, and especially around here with the amount of parks and recreation around here, and also with the hospital and the university. They'll all be hinging very much so on the state budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So those are some of the big news things. Are you going to miss doing the news when you move into advertising?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Journalism's, a first love. And there's no saying that I can't do any journalism at all. So when the opportunity comes and I have the impetus, then yeah, absolutely, I'll throw my hand in.
So you'll have to put a disclaimer on there, not.
I'm not exactly sure how to address that. I might just maybe submit the idea to the current news director, and we'll see what he says. Yeah.
Or she.
Absolutely.
Well, tune in, folks. You're listening to Clarion Connection. I'm Ron Wilshire with Kelsey Huebert.
Thanks, Ron.